Hello and welcome to Film Companion South. Today's Ask BR episode is about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by Quentin Tarantino. Pratik Narayan asks, in your opinion, since it was a Tarantino film, was it reviewed lightly? Were the flaws of the film highlighted less? I don't know. This question comes up whenever somebody doesn't like a movie and then it's directed by a major director and then asks if, okay, all you guys who like the movie because it was done by a major director. That's a tough question to answer because I think I genuinely liked the movie. I wasn't such a big fan of Hateful Eight, and that was Quentin Tarantino film. I liked this much more than I liked Hateful Eight. So it's a tough question to answer because I think a movie ultimately works on its own terms, and I've never been a huge fan of the recent Christopher Nolan movies, for instance. I've liked them, but not to the extent that other people like them. And I can ask the same question: do you guys like them? Because the Christopher Nolan, if somebody else had directed Interstellar, would you really be okay with that kind of, pacing and repetition and constant revisiting of stuff? I think we should all be true to ourselves and say, okay, you know what, despite all this, such and such a filmmaker made it, but I have these problems with it. I think people do that at times. But if they're not doing it, then I don't know. It's very tough to find out because you don't know whether they really like the film or whether they're liking the film because of Tarantino. It's very tough to say. Sahir Ravi says, what's your opinion on Margot Robbie's Sharon Tate? Why does she speak less and smile more? Why is she less of an entity and more of a concept? I don't know if speaking is necessarily a character trait, right? I mean, it's not like somebody gets so many dialogues and therefore they have a great role. For me, she's embodying the spirit of the era, the zeitgeist, right? She's like the cusp. She's on the cusp of stardom. The most beautiful sequence that she has in the movie is when she goes into that theater that's playing her movie, and she just starts watching it because she's curious to see herself on the screen. But then she sees others around her like laughing at her stuff and enjoying her stuff, and she like really gets a kick out of it. And part of the knowledge of what really happened to Sharon Tate plays into this as well. But she kind of embodies this spirit hovering over the film, the spirit of that late 60s, that the kind of person where she was on the edge of stardom. And that's what it is. That's how Quentin Tarantino is used to, which is why I love the character, because unlike the typical Quentin Tarantino character, she doesn't talk too much. She just is. She kind of floats through the movie. And I love like little touches, like she gives a hitchhiker a lift, and when that's just before the theater scene, and after that the hitchhiker gets off, they've been clearly talking all along the way, and about their lives and her life. He's genuinely interested in other people, and she gives the woman a hug and then sends her on her way. And it just tells you these small things about this person, about how she loves enjoying these pool parties, how she loves that whole Hollywood vibe and atmosphere. And I think that's a great place to be for a character. And I don't think the number of lines that somebody speaks has has any bearing on what it is, because she's used as the spirit of this film, and I think she was used beautifully. Ramanan Shekhar asks, what do you think QT's last film will be like? What do you specifically want it to be? I really want him to make a Star Trek movie. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and he's been speaking about it. I would love to see what he does with that kind of a universe. Dakshinamurthy says, I personally like the film. Initially, I was confused about the ending and the role of Margot Robbie. After doing some research, I understood the intention, and then I love the film. To understand the film, you must know the history. Should such a film be made? Yeah, I think so, because see, there are some films where you have to know what happened to kind of appreciate it, because if somebody is tweaking history, you have to know what the history was. And even when I saw this film at Cannes, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be a tough sell in India, because like unless you've really followed the new wave Hollywood of the late 60s and early 70s, I mean, a lot of people may not even be familiar with Roman Polanski's work, let alone Sharon Tate and all that kind of stuff. So, see, it's easy in a movie like Inglourious Basterds. It's easy because everyone knows about the Nazis and everyone knows that this is what happened with Hitler. So when you're changing that around, it's easy. Everyone knows in Django Unchained, everyone knows about slavery and stuff like that. So when that kind of things, even if you don't know the specifics, when things are so broadly spread out through history, and when somebody is making a change to them, you kind of understand what's happening. But this is such a specific point in history, and that too not even general history, it's Hollywood history. So I think some knowledge of it would help. But even if you read about Sharon Tate, if you didn't know about that era in general, I don't know how much it would help to kind of generally watch a movie where this kind of thing is being subverted. So I don't know. Avinash Ajarapu says, he asked 3 questions. Is Quentin Tarantino talking about his obsolescence on pop culture through Rick Dalton? I don't think so, because it's like, I think Rick Dalton is basically a washed up actor. Are you trying to tell me that Quentin Tarantino is washed up as well? I don't think so. Do you think this movie screenplay will be discussed in film circles for its loose, languid nature? I think the screenplay is it, but I think, one thing that people are missing out a lot is everyone's talking about the writing, but the directing is what really makes this movie. When the Brad Pitt character goes to the Spawn Ranch, there's very little screenwriting. It's about how the whole thing is edited and staged and how the acting is and things like that. How everything moves together, because it's screenwriting alone cannot take care of such a long and languid sequence. So it's about Quentin Tarantino as a director, and after so long about making films, if he can still direct so beautifully, that really says something. In fact, I really like this movie because I was beginning to tire a bit of that Quentin Tarantino of the other films, because they're entertaining and all that, but you've already shown me you can do this. What else can you do? That kind of comes up because, yes, I know that your characters can talk these fast pop culture things. I know that you can give me these surprise endings and all that. In fact, in this film, that's what I did not like. I did not like that ending because it was just like a Quentin Tarantino movie. I liked the other parts because it was like a director really stretching and allowing his mojo to flow, and the sequence after sequence was so beautifully directed that I was really swept along with the flow of the film. So I really loved that. Your opinion of Cliff Booth's secret. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie, because you have the scene where you get the boat and the woman is a nag and he has that crossbow kind of thing that's aimed at her, and then you don't know what happened. So I really like that not knowing bit, because it adds a bit of like a shading to the character, even though you really like the character. So I really like not knowing about it. So I don't know, many people I think thought that maybe he did do it, but that's the reputation that he has now, and that's also caused his stock to fall in Hollywood. So I really enjoyed that bit. Avanit Vinod says, do you think the relationship between Rick and Cliff could be alluded to that between Tarantino and cinema? I thought the ending made sense for it was dreamlike. I guess, between Tarantino and cinema, because if Rick is Tarantino and Cliff is cinema, then Cliff is below Rick in a way, though he's a good friend. I don't know. I'm not seeing this at all. But yeah, I'm willing to explore it if, like we take it further. Ashwin says, did you catch the censored version? No, I watched the full version at Cannes. If yes, what do you think about the cuts in the film? See, the cuts, bleeps, and the blurring of alcohol and cigarettes and all. I think it's very childish. I don't even know what they hope to accomplish by this, because I've always felt this, that if you want society to not be affected by something, you have to take it away. If you don't want people to smoke, then you have to ban the sale of single cigarettes on the street corners. That's the only way you can stop people from smoking, because they will think twice about buying a pack, and that's what it is. It's like you just blurring things out on screen doesn't do anything at all to anybody. Just putting a warning on screen, it's actually a desecration of the film, I feel, and I don't know what these guys hope to do, but it keeps happening. Surya Prakash says, is there any filmmaker in India who alters history in their movies? Why don't many of our filmmakers are hellbent in facts rather than putting up something fun on screen? Yeah, actually I felt that as well, because people take this whole biopic thing too seriously. And whether they want to alter history, I don't know, but at least, they can kind of pick and choose stuff that is interesting rather than trying to tell the whole story of X person or Y person. That makes it very boring. Prasanna says, I see filmmakers moving to the next level after their adolescent fascinations are satisfied, like Reservoir Dogs in the beginning and now Once Upon a Time, like Spielberg, Bridge of Spies, Lincoln lately, or Scorsese's Silence, or PTA Phantom Thread. Do you feel so? I don't know. I think Scorsese's Silence is followed by The Irishman, and that looks like a big gangster movie. I don't know. That looks like a typical Scorsese film. PTA, I don't know what he's doing next, but Spielberg, after Bridge of Spies and Lincoln, he's doing this big Robocalypse kind of movie. So he's doing a huge special effects movie. He's doing West Side Story, which is a huge musical. So I don't know if we can generalize this, but I do think that filmmakers, after there's an energetic phase at the beginning, and then they kind of, as you grow older, the things you want to talk about begin to differ. And I think that may be some of it, saying that, okay, I've talked about all this, now what else? So, like I said earlier, I don't know how many more movies I would have wanted to watch this old Tarantino, because if I want to watch that kind of movie, I can always go back and watch Kill Bill. I can always go back and watch Inglourious Basterds. I don't want him to keep making that same Tarantino-ish movie in a new setting each time. That becomes a bit boring after a while. Raghuram says, what is your favorite Tarantino movie and why? Very simple and cliched answer. I think it will have to be Pulp Fiction, because that's the first time something like that exploded, and it was just like the effect of that movie was so mind-blowing. The way people talked, the way the sequences were written and they were cut, the way the whole thing was so beautifully directed. I think it was such a, wow, this adrenaline rush. I think once that signature was established, I mean, I love some of the other films also, but that rush that one got in Pulp Fiction, I don't think that ever happens again, because what's new is just what hits you best. Satya Narayanan says, do we really need 783 minutes of Brad Pitt driving through Los Angeles? There's so much of him, and all the film could have been under 2 hours. Okay, I know you're exaggerating, but I don't think it's just about him driving through Hollywood, because it's basically this. See, right, the film is about 3 rungs of Hollywood. There is a washed up, like a movie star. There is the stuntman below him. And then there's Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. That's like Hollywood royalty, because she is by association Hollywood royalty, because he's just delivered Rosemary's Baby. It's the biggest hit in town, and he's the coolest director in town. The distance that Brad Pitt travels after dropping off Leonardo DiCaprio's character to his house, because that man's lost his driving license, he needs to be dropped at home. We need to see how far Brad Pitt's home is from Leonardo DiCaprio's home. You can easily say he leaves and then you cut and he drives up near the trailer behind that drive-in scene. But this way we see he passes through the drive-ins, he passes through the signs, and then the signs get smaller, it gets like more wilder, like the city kind of falls behind, and he goes far, far, far away, and then you see the drive-in theater, he drives around the drive-in theater, and he comes to his trailer. So you really need to see the difference between this plush royal place that DiCaprio character is staying in and this trailer that this guy is staying in, and how they're meeting. So I really think through this music and through the driving and all that, we're really getting a sense of the spatial distance between these two places. And I don't think that's unnecessary at all, because if you notice, this movie has some of Tarantino's most beautiful protracted sequences. He's using time so beautifully. He's using time to kind of establish so many things. He's using time to establish suspense in that Spawn Ranch sequence, because it's a very long sequence, and the longer he draws it, the tenser we get. He's using time in this Brad Pitt sequence, driving sequence, to establish the distance between where this man is and where this man is. So I think this is like all part of the film. It's not just somebody driving, See, one of the things is that just because nothing happens in the film, it doesn't mean nothing is actually happening. Plot is one of the most redundant aspects of cinema. I mean, for most people, you just like, what next? But sometimes movies go beyond what's next, and they kind of show like a vibe or this feel, and that's what this is. Ajay says, I couldn't connect to the storyline as I wasn't aware of the history tragedy of Sharon Tate. I don't think people need to know about MGR Karunanidhi to enjoy Iruvar. Why QT didn't consider the fans of Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Basterds while writing the screenplay? See, he's made it for a primarily American audience. I don't think even in Europe they know so much about Sharon Tate or something like that. For that matter, even modern day Americans, I don't know how many of them really know about the Sharon Tate murder and something like that. On that topic, I would recommend this book by Peter Biskind called Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. It's a fantastic book, and I think it's a great way to experience what that late 60s, 70s Hollywood, which is new Hollywood, when all those European influences were trickling and all those European cinematographers and directors were coming in. I think it's a great way to get a sense of that era in Hollywood. You should just check out that book. Kandi Sachin says, how do you think it's possible to make the audience laugh while horrible things happen on screen? Because it is exaggerated to a cartoonish level, because it's not horrible as in real horrible. You're kind of, when that flamethrower scene happens, I think everybody just laughs because that is a bad person, and a bad thing is happening to a bad person, not to a good person. If it was happening to a good person, you won't laugh. I'll tell you another thing, that when the dog goes and clamps his jaws on this man's groin, right, like this Texas groin, why do we laugh? Because that man has been threatening to kill Brad Pitt. So we want the dog to take care of it, and we laugh because it's a hilarious thing. Anybody getting kicked in the nuts has always been a source of comedy, and something happening so painfully to a bad guy is even better. And this is where I'll come to the time aspect again of this film. When we watch the first time Brad Pitt enters his trailer and the dog is waiting for its food, right, we get a very long sequence of him opening the cans, letting the food drop from the can, and then he opens another can, and then he lets the food drop again, and then he goes and sits in front of the TV, and then he does, and then the dog goes and eats the food. So we kind of know two things from this. One is the dog follows that signal, that click signal. The second thing is we get to know that the dog is going to wait till that signal is given. So in the end, when the same sequence is repeated, the dog is sitting there, it doesn't pounce on him right away. Why? Because it's waiting for Brad Pitt to give the click signal, and it's trained to wait that way. We get that frame because it's like, otherwise why would a dog, we just assume that a dog will jump at an intruder, right? It's a strange person. Why isn't the dog doing so? Because it's waiting for Brad Pitt's command. So the minute he does, then it goes and jumps at the guy. And that's what the mirror events are. And I think these are the things that time establishes, because as long as we are seeing incidents, we have to think, what is it? Just absorb the whole thing, the sequence of events, and it makes us enjoy the movie so much better. At least it makes me enjoy the movie so much better. Vishnu P. Sunil Kumar says, do you think in Tarantino's universe, Rick Dalton would have played the lead role in Chinatown instead of Jack Nicholson once Sharon Tate introduced him to Polanski? That is a lovely thought. I would love to see that happen. That would have been something else. Even though I love Jack Nicholson to death in Chinatown, that would be really interesting. Like, that would be really alternate history, because Chinatown is such an iconic film and Jack Nicholson is so iconic in that role. Finally, Avanish Chandrasekharan says, there was a lot of outrage by fans and people close to him about Bruce Lee's portrayal in the film. Should films strive to be respectful to deceased personalities unless they were evil like Hitler? How faithful should a film be towards portraying a real life person's personality? I personally fall on the way of, it's like a creation, okay? So I don't think a film is bound to show like only good things about supposedly good people, because who knows what Bruce Lee was really like. Maybe he was kind of a blowhard on the sets, I don't know. But the point to really ask is, supposing someone mocks Bruce Lee, does that mean you're mocking him? You're laughing at Bruce Lee in this movie, but does that mean you won't go back and watch Fist of Fury or Enter the Dragon with the same respect and awe that you have for Bruce Lee you always had? I don't think so. The two are mutually disconnected. It's like we may laugh at a meme that makes fun of an actor that we like, but that doesn't mean that we stop liking that actor or stop respecting that actor once we go back to the actual movie. These are two separate things, and I don't think they're linked. So with that, we conclude this episode of Ask BR, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It was great fun talking about it. I love the film. I watched it actually on IMAX also. It was great. So see you soon in the next Ask BR. Until then, keep watching Film Companion South.